everyone, this is Nancy from the Highline Heritage Museum. I'm the executive director, and it is a pleasure to welcome you. Thank you once again for coming and join us. I would like to take a moment to recognize that we are on a native land, and please think of honor to those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, the Snoqualmie, Nisqually, and the Montpelier tribes. This is the National Native American Month, and so please acknowledge that too. And once again, we're going to be doing this every single time because we believe that this is important. It's a way to share history and to cherish each other. So thank you once again, and now here we are, Crystal.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 7 Stories. If you are online watching, welcome. We welcome you to the Highline Heritage Museum, where we are here hearing stories live. And if you're in person, thank you for making this a lively event. We appreciate it. Well, I am so glad that you all are here today. 7 Stories is a community gathering event where we get the pleasure of hearing local storytellers share real stories based on a particular theme. Our goal is to always have 7 diverse stories under 7 minutes each. Tonight's theme is Plan B. And in honor of Plan B, we're going to have 6 storytellers instead of 7.
We haven't added one.
We haven't added one. Okay, now we're switching to Plan C. Back to 7 stories. You are welcome. As I've said before, I love the fact that we get a chance to become family and friends and strangely familiar with each other after walking in a room or sitting down in front of a screen of strangers. And then strangely, by the end of the night, you feel some type of connection to the people that share their stories. So to our storytellers, thank you for letting us in into a small piece of your lives. And to those who are watching these treasures, thank you for honoring this time and taking a moment to hear and to lean in and to know one another in a new way. Hopefully, by the end of this time, you are inspired to come and tell your own story. So we're always looking for active storytellers to come. You don't have to be a professional. You just have to have a story. And it'd be great if it matched with the theme. So next month's theme is If Only I'd Listened. That's in December. And then in January, the theme is How Did I Get Here? And I'm sure many of us have stories right now that can match to that. So if you're out there and you're listening or you're in this room, it's your chance to sign up for 7 Stories. I do want to take a chance to thank and to acknowledge our supporters, the Burien Arts Association, Highline Heritage Museum, Burien Culture Hub, B-Town Blog, and a committee of community members. Without all of these wonderful supporters, this evening would not happen. And of course, our storytellers in advance. Thank you for coming and sharing. So, to start off the night.
Turn off cell phones.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm having sign language in the back by our lovely Sybil to remind us, please turn off your cell phones so that there's no ring-a-dings during our storytellers' time so it's not a distraction. And we appreciate that as well. Thank you. Well, to start off this evening, we have our first storyteller of the evening, Laura Kennedy Gould. Laura moved with her husband, Paul, to Burien in 2013, shortly after she retired. Today, Laura has a busy retirement life, including singing in Coral Sounds Northwest. She is looking forward to the free holiday concert on Sunday, December 12th at 2 p.m. at Glendale Lutheran. Shameless plug. So if you're interested, go on over. So today we welcome, for our first story, Laura Kennedy Gould.
Whoa, can people hear me? Good, all right. On June 16th of 2012, I woke up and, as if by magic, my hand was tremoring. I thought, that's interesting. And I did my usual medical therapy, that is, I ignored it. But eventually, I went to a doctor. And she said, you are displaying Parkinsonisms, and she referred me to a neurologist. I can't tell you how much I clung to that isms. I thought, well, this means it's like Parkinson's, but it's not the actual Parkinson's. Nope, that's what I had. Parkinson's is a regressive neurological disease where you have all sorts of fun caused by a shortage of dopamine. And that ends my little scientific part of this speech. So, but there's always a plan B. And I'm going to suggest we do a little call and response here. That I'll go, but, and point at you, and you say,
There's always a plan B.
bingo. Okay. Well trained there. So, plan A was to work till I dropped. Really. But
There's always a plan B.
we chose the plan B, early retirement. I was 57 years old. Plan A was to stay in our lovely West Seattle house until they carted us off to the old folks home. And so, but
There's always a plan B.
so West Seattle had 2 stories and a circular staircase. Lovely house, but not really great for somebody with a movement disorder. So I was not familiar with Burien at all. I thought it was the place you got lost in on your way to the airport. But this is where we found the Rambler of our dreams. And so we moved to Burien, and it's been a great ride. Lots of friendly people here. So I'm in retirement. What am I going to do in retirement? And I thought, sit around and watch Downton Abbey reruns. But
There's always a plan B.
yeah, I realized I needed to keep my brain and my body active as a way of fighting the disease. One of the ways that I did that was that I started a blog called The Magic Trick, Life with Parkinson's. And it was a way of organizing all this little bits of knowledge I was picking up about the disease. And if you would like to take a look at it, not now, but just Google the 3 magic words, magic, trick, Parkinson's. You will get my blog. You'll also get a few magicians out there who are named Parkinson. So part of being a part of being a parky, and probably a general aging too, is to know when to stop. Last year, I tried a final downhill ski run at a place called Loop Loop. It's in north central Washington. And the first thing I did when I got off the lift was to ski over my husband's skis. Not generally thought to be a good thing. And as I was hurtling down the alleged green run, I could sense that my brain was going, turn, turn, turn! And nothing was being communicated to my legs. So I made it down, and I said, that's it for the day. But I have to say, I skied long enough, 30, 40 years, that I got my first and my last senior ski discount.
Nice.
So, but
There's always a plan B.
I see, I forget where I am. My plan B is I'm hoping the snow gods will bless us and that I can still go cross-country skiing and snowshoeing.
Nice.
So, I also had to give up on backpacking. This is probably not a big loss. But I had my goal of this beautiful wilderness in eastern Oregon called the Eagle Cap Wilderness. And I was gonna rent some horsepackers and have them haul the heavy stuff up and set up a base camp. I thought, I can do this. I can do this. Well, then I thought, I better do a trial backpack. So I went out on about a month before we were going to go to Eagle Cap, and I went off with my husband on a very easy, minimal grade path. And suddenly I turned into a zombie. Every step was agony. And I finally staggered into a clearing, and I looked at my watch and realized I had taken about an hour to go a half a mile. Not good, so we could see the backpacking in Eagle Cap was not gonna work for me, but what happened was I met a fellow parky blogger through my blog, and she lives in Hermiston, Oregon, and both she and her husband are avid outdoors people, and they know the Eagle Cap quite well. But she's in kind of the same movement disorder situation that I am. But my husband and her husband both wanted to do a real backpack. And so they did. While I hung out and went on day hikes with my friend. So, where am I? Flash forward to today. Plan A, I guess, would be keeping the same medications and exercise and just considering Parkinson's a annoyance. Well, that probably is not gonna work, but this summer, my husband and I went on a trip to Iceland that had been canceled because of the pandemic. However, about 2 weeks before we were gonna leave on this Iceland trip, I've always had this, for about 5 years now, I've been fighting this crooked posture that you can see. Well, it suddenly got much worse, and I was kind of walking at a 90-degree angle. And my lower back was in agony because it was holding the body in ways that it shouldn't be held. But
There's always a plan B.
Good. So the plan B was we were on a ship. So there was no, walking to your hotel or walking to a restaurant. It's all on the ship. And I also went through their shore excursions, and the ones that I had signed up for that said hike, I got out of those and went into the ones that said bus.
Right.
And I also became pals with his steward on the boat so that he would put my ice pack into their freezer. So cross our fingers, we're hoping to do the same strategy this year on a couple of trips. But
There's always a plan B.
in this case, I'm still searching for a plan B or plan C or plan D that will help me get right. That's why I'm sitting here. It isn't just because I'm lazy. So what's really sobering for me is to realize I'm in charge of my health. No one else can do this. I certainly rely on lots of outside experts, but I'm responsible for my health. And it's getting there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Every time someone says but this week, I'm probably going to say there's always a plan B before I catch myself and realize I don't have to say that anymore. That was great. Now I'd like to welcome our second storyteller of the evening, Marjorie Ellsworth. Marjorie is experiencing the joy of being retired and is loving every minute of it. She resides here in Burien, and we're pleased to have her here with us today. So please welcome Marjorie.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the story about how I met my husband, Eric, and there he is. Eric. If you were here last month, you heard him tell his side of the story, how he met me. So now you're going to get my perspective.
Thank you.
So what happened is, when I turned 30, this is quite a long time ago, I don't know what happened. My hormones kicked up or something. Anyway, I realized that I wanted to become romantically affiliated. And I had a lot of friends who had partners or who were romantically affiliated. And so I looked at what they had done to achieve this state. And a lot of them had just by default somehow become attached. They had sat next to their partner in a college class, or had lived downstairs from the person and met on the stairs, or some other equally just kind of random chance kind of thing. And so a lot of people I knew had, that was their method for, is this still working okay? Okay, good. For meeting their partner. So I decided to use that method myself, and that I'm calling Plan A. So I did whatever I could for there to be opportunities for people to be around me who I might meet, and it just didn't happen. And then I ended up with my friends who were single, or who had friends who were single, asking them if they knew somebody or who I could possibly get to know. Anyway, so I didn't find anyone that way, and I really wanted to get romantically affiliated. I reached the point where I started proposing to my friends, and fortunately none of them said yes, since I didn't want to marry any of them, and they didn't want to marry me either. So I decided that Plan A hadn't worked, or the default option, and I decided to pursue Plan B. So Plan B involved my mom and my sister and I all sitting at Mom's dining room table in her condo, and the three of us writing an ad to and the ad that we wrote was SWF 32, looking for a single man for possible relationship who is warm, intelligent, not a Republican. Now revealing my political leanings. And I am a sometimes artist and computer programmer, attractive in certain lights. I enjoy creative projects and miscellaneous adventures. So I took that ad and I submitted it to the Weekly, which at that time was Seattle's weekly newspaper. And if any of you have lived in Seattle a long time, you probably remember it. And in those days, the way, if you wanted to get a partner and you wanted to advertise, you did it through an actual newspaper with actual print and pages and classified ads and, personals. So my ad appeared in the personals section of the Weekly for a couple of weeks. And I was assigned a mailbox that letters to me, to my ad, were sent to, and then the Weekly mailed them to me. And it was really fun. Really fun. I kept getting bundles of letters in the mail. And I ended up getting 30 letters. And read them, they came in bunches, and my friends and I would all sit together and, sort them. And it was really interesting, the variety of people who replied to my ad. There was someone who said he really enjoyed indoor sports. He enjoyed sports, especially indoor sports, and I think we probably all have an idea of what he meant and by that. So I didn't answer that one. And there was someone, more than one person, who wrote a kind of a financial statement about themselves, describing their assets, listing their assets, and their financial prospects, income, that kind of thing. That was really interesting. I didn't answer them either. And then there were a lot of letters that were clearly just copies that people were sending out as mass mailings. And I didn't answer them either. But and there were a few where there were photographs included, even though I hadn't asked for a photograph. And those were especially interesting and kind of frightening. One of them was a man who took a picture of himself with his Doberman pinscher, looking very alert, right at his side, and kind of frightening. And another man, and this, I kid you not, is really true, a photograph of a man, a headshot with his eyes closed. And I'm not really sure what kind of person he expected would answer his letter, but I wasn't that kind of person. So I didn't answer. And then I did go on a couple of dates with people, and it worked out well because I lived downtown, and I would meet them at a tavern called Two Bells in Belltown, where I had a friend who was a bartender. And it was very convenient because I asked him to, look them over carefully, so in case they murdered me later, he could identify them in a lineup. And fortunately, none of them murdered me. But so then I received letters in different batches, and finally my ad stopped running and the letters dried up. But finally I received one final letter, and it was the most wonderful letter. It started out by saying, "I am not now, nor have ever been a Republican." Great recommendation. And he said he had worked for McCarthy in '68 and McGovern in '72, establishing those great progressive liberal credentials. Anyway, and sang a lot of other really wonderful things. And he was obviously answering my ad and had thought about my ad. And the thing that scared me, though, was he had just been divorced. And besides just being divorced, he had 2 children. And I didn't have children. I didn't even have a cat. And I was really afraid. Would I be a wicked stepmother? Would they hate me? Would I be no good at this whole thing? I didn't know. So I put his letter in a kind of a maybe pile. And my best friend at the time, Holly, said, "You would be an idiot if you didn't answer that letter." So I did answer it, and I'm very happy I did, because I met Eric at Two Bells, and he was so great. He had the greatest smile, and he was wonderful. He did talk about his ex-wife a lot. So I think his divorce had been final the day before or something like this. And but he was just wonderful, and he was politically liberal and interesting and had a wonderful sense of humor and handsome and sexy and everything. Hi, honey. Anyway, and so after we'd been talking for a while, I invited him over for dinner, which, yes, okay, it violated all my principles that I had established for myself to maintain safety, which you're supposed to establish. I mean, I'm sure we all remember Ted Bundy, Mr. Charming, though he was a Republican. And I do need to add. And so you never really can tell if somebody's a serial killer or, a really nice person. And but Eric, at least was doing a really good imitation. So I had some extremely old leftovers, and I invited him over to my apartment right then, just throwing caution to the wind. And I went over and asked Tom to give me a call after a few minutes to make sure I wasn't dead. And my friend, the bartender. And so we went over to my apartment, and it was at 5th and Wall, right next to the monorail, where the monorail went by. You probably maybe remember this from last month if you were here. And so when it went by, sometimes I would wave at people. It was right outside my window. And anyway, so that was a good feature. But, so he came over and I had all these TV parts in the sink because Belltown at that time had a lot of empty lots, vacant lots where people threw things like old TVs. And I wanted to make earrings out of the TV parts. So I would go wandering around back there and picking out bits of TV parts. And so I had a whole bunch of them in the sink soaking. And he was great. He came in, he didn't look astonished, and he took them all out and everything. And then Tom called and verified that I wasn't dead, so that was good. And and then he didn't kill me later, which was also nice. And then so we started dating, and it turned out he was really wonderful. And the longer we dated, the more wonderful I realized that he was. And finally, we actually did end up getting married on a boat, the Good Time 2, off in Puget Sound, off of West Seattle. It was a potluck wedding. It was really fun. And we've been married 33 years. And I have to say, it's only gotten better. It's astonishing how you can how you can still enjoy chatting with someone after all these years and still have things to say. It's the funniest thing. I mean, and it's absolutely true. He's still interesting and entertaining. Anyway, so my final point here is that it's important to believe in the power of advertising.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say, Eric, you have some competition. Your wife's a pretty great storyteller, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That was great. I want to sit at the table with you all sometime and compare notes. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for sharing your side of the story. If you were not listening in last month, you can still go back and listen in to Eric's story of how he met his wife and compare notes. Our next storyteller is Deborah Apple. Deborah grew up in Connecticut and has lived in other states and countries. She has always liked to tell stories, and for the last 10 years, has enjoyed sharing her stories to a live audience as well as hearing stories from others. So that means Deborah's in good company. Deborah is on the way back in, and so I'm going to give her a quick moment to come back in. And before I do, maybe I'll just check in with you all. How's everybody doing? Okay, good. I can't ask you how you're doing if you're listening in, but I hope that you're enjoying a snack. In my honor, I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I also like pizza, chicken barbecue, plug to Burien's Pizza Gallery. They're my favorite. And I also like Sprite. So if you have any of those handy, you are welcome to give a toast to me. Again, let me just go over what's upcoming. December is our wonderful theme of, I think, If I'd Only Listened. And then in January, How Did I Get Here? So if you're listening in and you're like, I could tell a story too, this is not intimidating anymore. This is your moment, December and January. Okay, I think we're ready for Deborah Apple to come on up. Deborah's in good company. Deborah, welcome.
My husband and I have a daughter who married a wonderful guy, and they have two gorgeous little boys who are now 4 and 7. And each of these people, each of the four, has a very distinct personality, but they're all smart and they're creative and they're funny, and we love spending time with them. It's really a thrill to be with them. The thing is, they live in Israel. And if you were to look at a globe, you would see that that's pretty much on the other side of the world. So fortunately, we live in the era of WhatsApp. And they're really good about, really almost on a daily basis, sending us messages and pictures and videos. So we feel like, we're part of their lives, which is not when I lived there in the 70s and 80s. Forget cell phones, forget even a landline. My mother and I communicated by aerogram, if you remember what those things are. So we have that way of communicating. And for a while they said, hey, you want to do a video call? Yeah, sure. We tried Skype. I don't know, that just didn't work. Then there was some Google thing, and we did that for a while. But the main problem was the time difference. So by the time they've commuted home from work and they've picked up their kids and they've fed them and bathed them and teeth and pajamas, everybody's exhausted. They don't want to sit there and try to make conversation with me. So that pooped out. I mean, it was a valiant try. We appreciate it, but it didn't really go so great. So the best option is to be together in the same country, in the same house. And they came here a few times. So once they had 2 kids, forget it. It's a lot easier for 2 adults to go around the world than them. So we got in the habit of going once or twice a year. And when we'd get there, we'd find it took the boys a while to warm up to us because they didn't really know us, I mean, they're little boys and they saw us 6 months ago or something. So, we did the best we could. The other grandparents live 15 minutes away. So they have been involved from the get-go with these kids. My daughter says she doesn't know how they'd survive without them. They're lovely people. They do all the grandparent thing. They have them overnight. They're cooking. They're picking them up from school. They're taking them for ice cream, the whole bit. And they're very close. I mean, they have this, they adore their grandparents. So that's where I came up with the name for us, that we're the chopped liver grandparents. And if you're not familiar with that, there was a thing, in the past comics, and they go, what am I, chopped liver? Meaning not as good, okay? So, and the non-chopped liver grandparents, I gotta say, we're like family with them. And they really, I can see them take a step back when we're over there, that they're gonna give us a chance to have them. So our last trip was April 2020. Well, you know what happened. So first it was, is this Corona thing? Is that like a thing? Is that gonna mess with our trip? And even a travel agent said, nah, it'll be okay. Well, then a few weeks later, it's, should we cancel? And already over there, where they locked things down a lot faster than we did here, my daughter's saying, well, there's quarantine, and I don't know, will they let you in? Who knows? I don't know. And finally, the airline canceled on us and said, forget it, this isn't happening. So that was it. And we'd really been looking forward to it because we hadn't seen them for 6 months. And now I think, boo-hoo, we haven't seen them for 2 years, okay? So then when they locked down over there, they really locked down. They did not go to the playgrounds were closed, the parks were closed, everything was closed. They were home. And although their apartment is roomy for over there, by American standards, it's a pretty small apartment. So there's 2 adults and 2 little boys who are like whirling dervishes part of the time. And they just were together all the time in this apartment. But the silver lining, and I think we've all learned that we've had our own version, at least once, I hope, of a silver lining of this whole horrible pandemic, was that they'd never had time like this together, just at home, just to kick back when they're not dragging themselves home from work and just want to lay down and, die. So it was very nice for all of them. But, by the end of the day, they were already like, all right, enough already. So then my daughter said, hey, have you heard of Zoom? And I go, oh. She said, it's like we can do a Zoom call. It's like Skype, except it works better. And I said, that's great. Let's try it. So we started with the Zoom. And when I had read to them in the past, when I had done the video calls in the past, I had ended up reading them stories because, like I said, you can't talk to a kid who doesn't talk. And it was just too complicated. So I got it, and I love reading stories to kids. So I said, sure. So we'd, chat a little, and then I would read them some stories. So just like here, when people were cleaning out their closets and their drawers and getting rid of all this stuff, they were doing that there too. So a woman in their building put out a box with children's books that she didn't want anymore. And they picked up the first 3 volumes of Captain Underpants, which I'd never heard of. So that's prop number 1, in case you've never heard of it. So it's a series. It's like a comic book kind of thing. Well, I don't know what you call it. But anyway, and it's written by a guy in Bainbridge, which I read in the book. So I thought, whoa, when I'm facing the computer screen, I'm facing Bainbridge. So that, there was something felt good about that. Now, in Israel, it's paperback, black and white. So I went on Amazon, and I found in the United States, it's hardcover, color. So I ordered this first 3 books, and I started reading. And it was just a thrill, because here they are all clean and shiny, in their little animal pajamas, sitting there like this. And what I do is I'd read the pages, and then I'd hold it up so they could really have a chance to look at the pictures, and we did that. And I would just be looking at these luscious little boys who would get right up close, so I'd be like practically falling into their big eyes and the big red lips, and it was a thrill for me. So I read, and it was such a hit that I got the whole series. I read them the whole series. And then I read them the whole series again. And then I found out that Dave Pilkey wrote Dogman. So I got that whole series, and I read them that whole series. And meanwhile, the other grandparents bought them in Hebrew and were reading them there. So one thing that came out of this just, who knew, was the ultimate teachable moment. Because these kids, and it ended up more of the older one, he already knew the story in his language, and he understands English. But then he's hearing it in English, and he's getting this vocabulary. It's really in there. Words, maybe new words to him, and plus colloquialisms and idioms that he might not know. And I just had such a thrill reading this to him, and I would give it my all. I was like, I'm auditioning for some, weird thing, as expressive as I could and as silly as I could. So I read them the whole thing of that. And then there's Cat Kid Comic Club. So this was, and I would, not just that, I'd use it to say for letters, like, oh, see, it says dog, D-O-G, just to get him familiar with letters in English. So it was really great. So, and the other thing was, they thought so much of it was funny. So there was one particular thing in this Cat Kid Comic Club that Petey the cat, Petey, has a son, Lil Petey, who's actually his clone, but they have a father-son relationship. And Lil Petey wants to have his friend come over, and Petey's just like fed up, and he goes, please, he goes, okay, you can come over and you can play, but I don't want to hear a peep from you. Do you understand? Not a peep. And then they go, beep. Well, they just thought this was hilarious, or hilarious, as my grandson thought the word was, and it stuck, and now we say hilarious. So they would ask me to read it over and over again. There were other things that I read over and over again, but I can't remember. But this one stands out in my mind because my daughter filmed it. So she sent me a video of the computer screen where I'm there reading the book, that part, and the boys are on the couch going, because they know it's coming, and then they go, beep. And I watched that thing over and over and over. I cherish it because to me that proved that I had gone from chopped liver to rock star. I just felt like, oh. So it was Plan B worked out really well for me, and I just loved it. And I just want to say to Dave Pilkey, if he's out there and if he's listening to this, we love you, Dave Pilkey. Oavim otcha, Dave Pilkey. Thank you.
Congratulations, Deborah, for getting off the chopped liver grandparents list.
We'll see if I remain.
I think you're on a good path. Thanks again. Our next storyteller is Don West. Don has found that often, the more certain he is that a specific group of people he's talking to need to take his point and act on it, the more likely the point is to circle back around to him and convict him of something that he needs on his own. So he hopes that you will get something out of his story tonight, but he knows for sure that he will. So welcome, Don West.
Debbie, I loved Zoom, and I'm substituting now after retiring, actually in a real classroom. And I have to tell you, I missed the mute button. So the title of my story tonight is Plan B or Elephant Flyer. And those of you who know me know that my email address is Elephant Flyer. So now if I send you something, you'll know who it is and why it says Elephant Flyer. For several summers, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I volunteered for two weeks, for a month, for several summers, with one of my best friends' organization called Beyond Partnership. And so I would be with them leading a couple projects in Cambodia every summer. And this one summer we were in a town called Patresa, which is known for its marble. So I bought a 30-pound elephant made of this beautiful tricolored marble, and the greens and the browns and the tans wove through it, and it was really nice. And the guy wrapped it up in layers and layers of bubble wrap and put it in a big, hard box just to protect it. And then I carried it around Cambodia for a month. On the second project, there were new people who teased me about it. I didn't want to open it, and they teased me about it, and they were wanting to know if it was really an elephant. But I wasn't opening it and showing it to them. And for the last 4 or 5 days of that trip, one guy kept coming up to me several times a day and saying, "Don, the elephant flies on Friday." And because we were leaving on Friday. So that Friday, as we lifted off for Bangkok with the elephant under my seat, I became an elephant flyer. More to come. The following summer, I was being trained to lead trips, and my friend had to leave on the second day of the trip to get home for his wife's surgery, so I just took over. So every Cambodia project always ended with a couple days at Angkor Wat where we all could learn about the grandeur and reach of Cambodian culture, and then a day or two in Bangkok. That later part, partially because at the time it was the only way to get home, and partially because Steve thought that it was important for North Americans who had just spent 2 weeks as far out into the Cambodian countryside as you could get among wonderful people who had so little and lived so simply. It was important for those same North Americans to see what a major Asian capital city and economic hub looked like and felt like, especially one that had risen from a lower income economy to an upper middle income economy in a very short period of time. So the day or so in Bangkok involved a tour of several major historic and cultural institutions. We saw a lot. And our wonderful tour guide, Apan, knew how to get us everywhere we needed to go really quickly, which is really important in Bangkok. And once she realized that apparently, unlike a lot of the Americans she knew, that we really weren't interested in massage parlors, she chose a perfect itinerary for us. So at the end of a very long, exhausting day of being all over Bangkok, we're charging along, hitting at least 30 miles per hour on the freeway, and we looked through the front window of our van, and there was the Bayok Sky Hotel. That was important because that was the hotel we were staying in, and that meant when we got back there, we would get to rest in a luxury room. It was also important because the Bayok Sky at the time was the tallest building in all of Thailand. And it was right there, right in front of us, just beckoning us home after a long, hard day. That's when our lead van with a pawn in it turned 90 degrees to the left. And amidst audible groans in the van with the group I was supposed to be leading of, wait, what? I remembered Plan B. Because I remembered that it's a requirement of a pawn's tour company, or the company she works for, that at the end of any day, she brings the people by the gem factory. And gem factory is a gross understatement. This place puts the exclamation point on the other side of every story about Southeast Asian poverty. You start out with a movie that talks about the heroic efforts of Thailand and going out and mining all the diamonds and other precious stones. Of course, I started out with my Cambodian friend Rada mentioning all the places in the movie that were actually part of Cambodia. But the next thing you do is you walk through a shop and you see actual artisans making actual jewelry. Then you walk into the light, into a showroom that can't be very much smaller than a Costco. And you see diamonds and rubies and sapphires and emeralds and gold and silver and in every possible shape, and earrings and necklaces and bracelets and tiaras and objects and even some elephants, and on and on and on. And you're in the midst of this staggering wealth, plus the fact without even having to ask, you get your own personal, young, female-friendly guide to help you shop. So as she walks around with you, she gradually turns up the pressure, tries to talk you into spending an amount that for a lot of us on the trip meant next year's salary. So I knew about the gem factory. I knew about Plan B for the previous trips, but in his haste to leave, Steve had forgotten to remind me, and it had slipped my mind too. So I was able to explain to the people in my van, the rear van, what was going on. I reminded them that they were here to learn and experience new things, and they would qualify for both of those objectives in this experience. Not so with the other van. They just kept staring at me darkly as they tried to ditch their young Thai friends. And it really didn't get any better with them until they got back and they were able to relax at the Bayok Sky. Well, in the van the next morning, as we were driving to the airport to drive home, Plan B met my flying elephant. One of the people in the group had complained about, in the van, he was complaining about the trip to the van factory. He said, I spent 2 weeks getting close to poor Cambodian people and worked and poured their hearts out, and I don't appreciate this opulent bookend on my trip. And although I didn't totally put it together at the time, at least in time for that particular conversation, that was the point where I realized that tour to the gem factory was an essential part of the Cambodia trips and had to remain part of them. Back at the start of our original trip, a couple weeks earlier, when I had met that guy, he had been explaining to me about a trip he took up to Seattle. Of course, it rained, but he had this wonderful trip, family trip, and they went to Vancouver and they did all this wonderful stuff. And he said, it only cost $1,500. It was nothing. He didn't meet one person in Cambodia who thought $1,500 was nothing. He did cover some incredibly important interpersonal and cross-cultural and cross-ethnic ground during those 2 weeks in Cambodia. But in most ways, he didn't get anywhere near as close to people as he thought because he didn't realize how different his life was from his Cambodian friends. They were relating in a wonderful way, but he wasn't seeing some obvious signs. His life is actually much, much closer to the people who are buying tiaras at the gem store. And that's why it's important for him to go and see that. Well, I was very satisfied with myself for making that connection. I recommended to my friend Steve that he bill the required trip the next time, not as a necessary bother to put up with, but as an important learning experience. And then I remembered my flying elephant. I only paid $80 for that elephant that I would have paid $400 or $500 for in Seattle. But almost no one in the small Cambodian city where I bought that elephant had $80 to spend on something to put on their mantle. I'm pretty sure they didn't even have mantles. So I was realizing I have a lot of elephants flying around in my life. I have a couple cars. After the first half of my adult life, talking about how silly it was to have 2 cars, I own my own home. It has a lot more rooms than we need. I have hundreds of books just sitting on the shelves, not doing anything. And when my phone or my computer breaks, I go buy a new one, although not as often as my friend Jason says I should. And we don't need to feel guilty about flying elephants in our lives, because there is absolutely no way to avoid them, unless the air around us gets so thick that we can't see past them to meet real needs. We do need to be aware of the flying elephants, though. They should, one, make us humble when we're pointing fingers at our rich friends in their excess, and they should also motivate us to go on to plan B and eliminate as many unnecessary elephants as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. I will be taking inventory of elephants in my life. Our next storyteller is Nancy Salgueira. Did I pronounce that right? McKay. And Nancy is the director of the Highline Heritage Museum. She is a jewel to this community and the recipient of numerous awards. We are really blessed that she is here and offers the support in allowing us to host 7 stories here. Her heart for preserving story rightly and serving others is very evident. In her free time, she likes trying new foods, painting, kickboxing, yes, reading, artistic cultural experiences, and embracing the nature of the Pacific Northwest, which is wet and rainy right now. So she's probably the one who enjoys it the most in the room. Welcome, Nancy.
It is very interesting for me to be here because it's always like, working in the museum, but sharing something personal right away makes me feel more vulnerable. And it is this element of shyness that I'm like, what am I nervous sharing my personal story instead of, sharing something about the museum. The one that I'm going to share is very, very, very close to my heart. This one, I grew up in Mexico City. I have hearing issues. And because of that, I did not have interactions with people. And so for many years, from the moment I was born all the way up to probably, high school, I did not have much of a social interactions with people aside of my family. So I would be at school, but I would not engage with people in general. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up with no friends in a place where I would be super afraid of kids in general. And so I will be more comfortable with grown-ups than with kids. And so when I arrived to the States, they found that I had this brain tumor. And part of that process is also realizing that I probably won't be able to have any children. And so I make peace with that. I was like, okay, I'm fine with that. I was 17 when they told me that. And later I met my husband. And before marrying him, I said, okay, I won't be able to have children. Are you okay with that? Yep, I'm okay with that. Like, okay, let's do this. And so right away, we were, making plans. We traveled all over the planet. We did all kinds of things. It's almost like we were just having fun. We bought a house that has 5 bedrooms, and I told him, why are we doing this? It's just the 2 of us, and we are not going to have children. And he tells me, well, I'm going to have my own baseball room. You're going to have your own painting room. I love painting. And then we're going to get guest rooms. And then obviously going to be a bedroom. Like, okay, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense, honestly. But still, we did it. We got 2 little doggies, and it was fine. I started to have these issues with my tummy. I was like, I don't feel good. And finally I go to a doctor. And the doctor tells me, you're pregnant. And right away I say, no, this is not good. I mean, this is not right. I'm not pregnant. It's not possible. Like, no, you are pregnant. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I'm not pregnant. And then right away, his response to me was, are you married? Do you worry about not being in a relationship? Like, no, I've been married for 5 years. That's not an issue. But I'm telling you, I'm not pregnant. Can you check it? And I was a completely denial. I mean, for many years, I built myself thinking, number one, I'm afraid of children. Just like, no way who said I will be near children. I just cannot. They petrify me, used to petrify me. Then the idea of becoming a mom while dealing with a brain tumor is like, no, it's not going to happen. And I remember him just looking at me strangely, and I'm just staring at him and like completely stunned, like, this is not possible. And then, like this twilight zone, you don't think things are real, almost like you're super drunk, like, no, this is not real. And I remember going outside of the office, and my husband was out there, like, hey, why are you here? You normally don't come to any of my doctor's appointments. Like, it's something funny about this one. Like, yeah. And we were outside, and it was a bench, and I was like, okay, I need to tell you something. And so I tell him that I'm pregnant. He immediately got excited and happy and joyful and crying and all that. And I'm just staring at him. It's like, are you truly understanding this? And he said, yes, we're gonna have a kid. And he was all jumpy and excited. And it took me months to truly, how can I say this? Understand I was becoming a mother. When I say, okay, I'm pregnant, okay, my plan B is kicking in. How am I going to do this? How am I going to be having my pregnancy when I'm dealing with medical issues? My medication for my tumor, I'm the first generation with that. And so what that means is there's no studies done. There's no proof. I mean, there was more proof of alcohol and smoking and drugs in general on side effects of kids when you're pregnant. This one was no studies. I mean, I'm the first generation. I was like the little, bunny in the lab. That was me. And so I told everyone that I was not going to take my medication. And so everyone like, are you crazy? The moment the brain grows too much, you're going to get blind. And once you get blind, this is it. You're blind forever. You will not be able to regain your sight. And I said, there's no studies done with this medication. Why would I risk the life of my little one? And they're saying, I remember that when I took that decision of not taking my medication, I knew that I was gambling with my life. And I knew that once I was blind, it would be a chain reaction with all my endocrine system. And so, like, nope, I prefer gambling than knowing that if my baby's born, that she would be deformed or have so many issues, and carrying the guilt that was me causing that, it would be like, too much pain to bear. I was way too scared to, the idea of hurting her in any way or in any shape was way too strong, despite of myself. And so that's when my maternal instinct kicked in, like, nope. I remember that probably my pregnancy, I cried every single day. It was fighting against doctors. It was fighting against my family. They were like, you're already deaf. What are you saying? Are you going to be blind? How are you going to be being a mother like that? Like, I don't care. I will gamble. And so every single doctor's appointment, and then I got more medical complications, of course. It was just a very painful experience, and that did not allow me to feel a true or embrace the sense of pregnancy. It was like, oh, everyone's so happy. No, everyone's scared. Everyone is nervous. Everyone has anxiety. And I remember that when finally, I was born prematurely. So I even told the doctors, like, that's the reason why I have all these issues. And so, like, can you have a C-section for my daughter at 7 months, and then, I can take my meds and then I don't have to get blind? Nope. They still thought that they would convince me to take my medications until the end. And what happened is that every trimester, the speed of the tumor will continue to grow. And so every passing day, the risk of all the risk of more issues happening was increasing. I was like, nope. And so I'm crazy, I know. I'm crazy. But once again, my maternal instinct was kicking in. It was like, despite of everyone scared, angry, all that, it was, like I said, I'm not gonna go too deep into my issues, but once I made it somehow to my full pregnancy. The day that my C-section was planned for February 14th, and so it was February 7th, and one of those moments where you're alone at home and you have nothing to do and you already cleaned the house so many times and you got all ready. And so before my pregnancy, me and my husband, we were doing a home renovation. And so I told him that I was going to help him, obviously before I knew I was pregnant. And so we were on the construction, and that day I decided to install insulation sheets on the room. And so I did that. I put installations in the walls, and a few hours later I started to feel funny. But no, it's just, tummy issues or pregnancy issues. It's not that big deal. But no, in the middle of the night I started to have this weird pain that happened pretty frequently. And I still was in a denial. My husband, I think you're having contractions. No, I'm good. That's not happening. It's not kicking in. My fear of children was kicking right that moment. I was like, okay, I've been protecting this little one. I've been defending this little one. But how did I cope with the fact that I don't like kids? They make me nervous. They make me a lot of anxiety. And so when my husband somehow convinced me to go to the hospital, the doctor was like, yeah, you are ready. And my head, no, I'm not. And even up to the last moment, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. And then so finally I had my C-section, and I saw her nice and chubby and pink as they were transferring. And it's like, wow, that moment, all the fear of children, all the fear, anxiety, it just, everything collapsed. My very first question, is she healthy? And I was expecting with so much drama that happened. I mean, there was just so much drama all around that I really expected her to have some type of issues, And they all say she's normal. Are you sure? Yeah, she's normal. She has no worries about this, no worry about that. And my plan B was that I grew up thinking I was not going to have children. I grew up thinking that I would not be able to hang out with somebody who cannot speak, I don't know, in many different levels. But no, she showed me that my plan B is magical, powerful, strong. And because of her, her name is Sophia. She's now 14, close to 15. She's my miracle baby. I'm not able to have any more children after all that drama. All the doctors will say, yeah, this is it. You cannot have more. I agree. And so my miracle baby is teaching me that kids are wonderful. They're little magical creatures. They're crazy, messy, and scary, but they're super, super worth it. And so I'm passionate about this place for them. And so just once again, my plan B is about open up and being able to share magic to the planet with the little ones. So thank you.
I love that so much. Plan B always is amazing when it includes magical little ones. Our next storyteller is Patresa Wells. Patresa is a writer, poet, and journalist living in SeaTac, originally from Oklahoma. She has called the Pacific Northwest home for over 20 years. Pre-pandemic, when she was not writing, she enjoyed traveling, but now she takes comfort in getting to know the murder of crows that lives in the green space behind her house. I think we've all become close to things that are around our house, like crows and puppies and birds, etc. So please welcome Patresa Wells.
So my plan B was implemented for me almost at birth. My name, Patresa, was a second choice for my mom. She originally intended to name me Opina. Thankfully, I think this was a better choice. But actually, my name became a plan B as well, when someone else decided to nickname me Patty, what most people call me. So it seems I've been operating from plan B my entire life. Plan B or plan C or plan D. But I'm here to say that taking the alternate route, the plan B, can actually lead you to where you want to be. I remember recently coming across an article in Gentleman's Journal or Men's Health or some magazine that I wasn't the target market for. The article was entitled Samuel L. Jackson's 8 Rules for Living Well. And if you want to know the 7 other ones, you'll have to look it up. But one of them was, as soon as you have a plan B, plan A is effed. His words, not mine. Mr. Jackson says that once you know what you want, get up every day and go out and do it. Yet as someone who's now in my 3rd career, going to college for the first time at 40 for a degree, English, that they tell you not to get in your 20s, to do a job, a writer, that most people don't believe is a real job, I believe it was having a plan B that got me here today. In my 1 year of focusing on writing, I've won multiple contests, including one for the city of Seattle, specifically the Space Needle. I'm a published writer, meaning I don't just write things, other writers deem them necessary and worthy to be shared. I'm currently making a steady, although small, income while going to college for my writing. And recently, I began writing for a local news organization. It's taken half my life to get to plan A. Actually, plan A was to be a child advocacy lawyer. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I had decided that when I was 5 because I watched the TV show Boston Legal way too much. A show that at 5 I had no business watching. But writing was always the goal when I was little. Writing and reading and dreaming and thinking. That was the dream. But of my grandmother's 12 children, only 1 had gone to college, and we lived in a college town. He got there as an athlete, something I never was, nor will probably ever be. There were times, and still are times, that I get discouraged that I didn't figure it out sooner. Didn't see plan A and run with it from day one, as Mr. Jackson says. When that happens, I remind myself that this is my journey, and it's full of a lot of roundabouts. If you ask anyone who knew me back then, they'd probably say they had no idea I wanted to be a writer. I hid it so well, I hid it from myself. When I first met my boyfriend, about 3.5 years ago, I remember him saying to me that he thought I was a writer, and I thought, how odd for him to see me before I saw myself. But, as I said, plan B got me here. And not just me, a lot of other writers as well. Some you probably are all familiar with. Maya Angelou became a writer and poet after having a string of different jobs. These included fry cook, sex worker, nightclub performer, Porgy and Bess cast member, and streetcar conductor. In fact, she was the first Black female streetcar conductor in San Francisco, something I didn't know. James Baldwin was a preacher first. He was a railroad worker and a guitar player in jazz clubs. Kurt Vonnegut was in the U.S. Army. He sold cars at a Saab dealership, and he lied about having a degree in order to get a publicist job at General Electric. And my personal favorite, having grown up in Oklahoma, Laura Ingalls Wilder, who started writing in her 40s, didn't find success until her 60s. Her first book was turned down over and over and over again. This book became the basis for the children's books we know today, Little House on the Prairie. True story, I have dressed my cat up as Laura Ingalls Wilder, including putting a bonnet on her. But that book that she wrote wasn't published until 84 years after she wrote it. She was also a teacher first, a job she admits to not liking very much, and a farmer. So that brings us back to me. Patresa Wells, Patty, but thankfully not Opina. Veterinary technician. I worked my way from cleaning kennels, always being willing to lend a hand, to learning the job that I spent about 20 years doing. One day, my responsibility working for a reproduction vet was to get up and get a dog who was in heat to stand in front of another dog so she could collect semen. Not exactly what I expected to do with my life, but I made the best of it. My next job or career was as a freight broker in transportation. I really didn't know anything about semi-trucks or truckers or logistics, and someone paid me to yell at truckers, which, if you're not aware of, takes a lot of moral fortitude. There are a lot of things that impact when you are able to pursue what you were meant to do, the least of which is talent. If I had pursued writing right away, I might have gotten into it too soon or been unprepared by life to deal with the onslaught of rejection that happens in the publishing world. If I hadn't pursued Plan B, I wouldn't have gotten to here today. I'm a writer, a poet, essayist, journalist, storyteller, and someday a novelist when I have the time. And it was Plan B that got me here. And if you're ever worried that it's too late to arrive to the place that you always wanted to be, and that others might judge you for not getting there soon enough, remember that when it's time for them to tell your story, all those things that you did before you arrived at that place, they might mention them, but they'll only be a footnote. Thank you.
Thank you again. Our final storyteller of the night is Eric Matheson. And if you listened last month, you were captivated by Eric's retelling of how he met his wife. Today, he's back. And and we're ending out the night with you again. So again, no pressure. Thanks. You are our Plan B to our Plan B. Please welcome Eric Matheson.
Okay, well, all right, here's my rebuttal to Marge's rebuttal. No, I guess we better go on to something else. So anyway, when Marge and I decided to move down to Mexico, we decided to spend the first few months in Puerto Vallarta, because it's kind of a world-class resort city with, beautiful beaches and plentiful strawberry margaritas and Coronas and things like that. But, we realized that, that this couldn't be permanent because, it was too hot. And above all, it was way too humid. So we needed a Plan A before we even left to go down to Mexico. So, of course, Marge does extensive research. And so she came upon the town of Ajijic. And, the drone shots of the area showed an incredibly beautiful, colorful Mexican town. It's a place, has the largest percentage of expats of anywhere in Mexico. And it's only 40 miles from the second largest city in Mexico, so there was an airport close by. And of course, the boosters always said it had the second best climate in the world. So this sounded like a great place, to move to. But of course, you don't want to, move somewhere without, checking it out first. So we went down there one May to check it out. And it was a colorful town, and it had nice people, and, and we had a really fun week. Well, maybe except for the fact that Marge was stayed in bed the whole week with stomach upset and could only watch Star Trek movies on the only English channel that we could get. So anyway, we sort of said to ourselves, okay, all right, we'll move here, okay. But, once we got back and started to talk about it a little more seriously, we realized that, boy, that was, pretty dusty. And, the mountains around are kind of brown, and the main highway, Carretera, I get kind of nervous through, with Spanish with the pronunciation with Nancy here, but Carretera. And we noticed, it was kind of, that was the approach to town. And they had these, ugly trees that had really been cut way back, and they were just the little stumps. So we decided, well, there goes plan A. And so Marge went back to research and came upon San Miguel del Ende. How was my pronunciation? Not too well. Oh, thank you. Good. But anyway, and it was a World Heritage Site. It was an artist mecca, had a famous historical cathedral. In fact, all of its architecture was very famous and well thought of. And, this was definitely the place to go for in-the-know expats. So that's what we decided. That was our plan B, to go to San Miguel. So we were living in Puerto Vallarta for the first couple of months. And again, you don't want to move somewhere without, doing a little research, checking it out. So we went to San Miguel. We headed off to San Miguel, but it was, pretty far away. So Ajijic was right in the middle between the two places. So we stopped for the night in Ajijic. And as we're coming into town, I look around and there's this canopy of beautiful trees. And I said, who planted these 50-year-old trees here in the, since we were last here a couple of years ago? It was amazing. And it turned out that, the trees had grown up, that had been trimmed back, and they were lovely green. It was just great. We found out from a friend that we had down there that her husband was in this folk band, and, they were performing that night. So we went over to this little cafe to see them perform. And, they were a folk group, and they sang these songs that not only did I know the chorus, but I knew all the lyrics. And of course, I sang along loudly with them to all these Peter, Paul, and Mary, and John Denver, and Kingston Trio, and things like that. And in the cafe, they had these little wood tables, and they had, wine bottles with a candle in them, and it kind of reminded me of, the coffee houses in the 60s I used to go to. So, wow, way cool. And they had this, and the owner, he would come around, talk to everybody, and then, he'd grab his ukulele and go up and play with the band. And so I was, wow, this is really nice. This is, nice people, a nice town, a lot of fun. But, we got to go get on to, where we're going to permanently live down there, which, was San Miguel. And so we're on our way. And, I went to school at WSU, don't hate me, but went to school at WSU. Which is way out in rural eastern Washington. And so if you've ever driven there, it's kind of, you got to turn right at Washtenaw, go past Dusty, sharp left at Colfax. And it's just, you get the feeling you're just out in the middle of nowhere. And so we were coming in, and then the farmers were all burning their fields. And it was right up to, the road. So it was like kind of driving like through hell. So anyway, we got there, and, and our experience was that, the streets were, very narrow. It was kind of polluted, and, it was very steep. The roads were really bad. And, the cathedral, we'd seen some nice cathedrals in Ajijic too. And the arts galleries, they were, were a little snooty for us, I don't know. And, the shopping, we just went to kind of a suburban mall off by the highway. And we did later, we did talk to this friend, and she told us about what a great time she had in San Miguel and how disappointed she was in Ajijic. So, I think a lot of it is just, the timing when we were there. Because this is the thing, when we went to Ajijic, it had been in May, and it hadn't rained since June. And, and the rainy season was coming up just the very next month in June, and those brown mountains would, green, they would just get beautiful. So, we looked at Ajijic again, and so as you might have guessed, we stayed and we moved to Ajijic, and though we didn't live there permanently, we really enjoyed it, enjoyed all the activities. It's a place, that you can live in, and the people are very welcoming. And so I would say that our plan B was to go back and do our plan A. Thank you.
That is great. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join us. Thank you, storytellers. Thank you for that deep dive. It takes so much courage to share your story with a room of strangers and a world of strangers that now seem like friends, especially in this room. So thank you so much for giving of your time. Thank you for those who are watching and who will watch. Feel free when it's possible to forward this on to others. And thank you again to all those that have supported this evening. We hope you have a wonderful night. Again, thank you for participating in 7 Stories. Bye-bye.